Why, hello there! I'm here today to tell you about how to do our next lab. This lab is going to test how much oxygen is dissolved in the water that we've been looking at with our plants. And we're going to do this through a test that's called the Winkler Method. So, to get started, I'm going to start with a bit of safety. So I'm going to put on my attractive goggles. Next, I want to make sure I have all materials. So you should have a container for dirty water. You can put any of the materials we use into that container. They will not make any kind of mess if they mix. Then you should have a test with all of the materials you need in it. Inside, you should have a glass container, a plastic container with a little hole in the lid, a little, looks like a shot, we'll call it a plunger, and a little tip that you're going to immediately just put on the plunger until it sticks tight. Next, you have a bunch of bottles of reagent. Five in total, and one large bottle. Then, of course, you should have your 2 samples, as well as your pipette, and, as always, your data table. Okay. Now that I have all materials, I think I'm ready to begin. So I'm going to be looking at my procedure the entire time, and I'm just going to go step by step. So the first step is to rinse the glass container with the water from one of our samples. So I'm going to start here with the covered sample. Now that I have my bottle all unwrapped, I'm going to begin with the directions. So it says to rinse the glass bottle 2 times with water from my sample. So this is to make sure that any of the past water that was in this container is washed out and we have only what we're using for this lab. So I'm going to rinse it once and just dump it into my extra water bucket. Rinse it again. Dump it out. If you spill, don't worry, that's why we have the trash bag down. And now I'm ready to begin. So we're going to fill it up all the way to the top. And then once it's at the very top, we're going to take the lid and put it on, and you should see that some water spills out over the side. That means you've done it right, and there shouldn't be any air bubbles in your sample. Next, we're going to remove the stopper, now that we've created some space, and we're going to put in 5 drops each of manganese sulfate to begin with. So put in my 5 drops, 5, and if you get a little bit too much, that's okay, not a reason to panic. And then I'm going to add my alkali azide, again 5 drops, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you should notice a color change. So now my solution is a little bit yellow and it's gotten cloudy. So, forgot my last step, which is to add just a little bit more water so that we can make sure it overflows on the side. So I'm going to use my pipette to grab some water, fill it to the top again, any extra in the pipette you can dump out, and then put the cap on, and again, it should explode over the side, which is good. It means we're not getting any air bubbles in there. So now it says to shake the container or invert it. So I'm just going to do that a couple times. Make sure it's really good and mixed. You should see some white particles floating around in there. And this is what my container looks like now. So it says to let that sit for a couple minutes. So I'm going to look at the clock, and I'm going to time it for 2 minutes. Alright, I've waited about 2 minutes now, and now I can see that my solution, all of the particles have gone to the bottom, and the top is pretty much clear. There might be 1 or 2 stray particles in there, but for the most part it's clear. So I'm ready to continue on. I'm going to remove the cap again, and now I'm going to add the sulfuric acid, 10 drops. Sulfuric acid is a strong acid, which means it could harm you. We are using a very dilute solution, so it should not burn, it should not do anything if it touches your skin, but that being said, we do want to be really careful with this. So I'm just going to add it to the bottle not let it touch my skin. If it does, I'll just wash it off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, and you can see that the solution is doing things. The particles are coming up from the bottom and they're filtering into the solution. So I'm going to again add just a little bit more water and cap it again so it overflows so there are no air bubbles in there. And again, I'm just going to mix it up just by tilting it like this. My goal is to get as many of those little particles to dissolve as possible. So when you finish, your solution should look about like this. And I'm going to put it to the side for a moment because I need to work with the plastic container now. So again, because other people have used these containers, we just want to rinse it out with the solution we're using. So I take a little bit of my water, fill it up, and rinse it out. Once should be enough. And then I'm going to set it to the side for a moment. So next, we're going to be adding a little bit of our solution to this plastic container. In the picture, it shows that you could pour it directly from the glass container into the plastic container. You could do that, or I suggest that you just use the pipette. It's going to be a lot easier on you. So I'm going to uncap it. And with my pipette, I'm just going to draw up some of the liquid and add it until it hits the 5 milliliter mark in this little container. So it might take more than one pipette full. Alright, and I'm doing that until the meniscus, or the very bottom of the liquid, hits the 5 millimeter mark. And then I put any extra solution into my waste container. So I've got about 5 milliliters of my liquid now, and I'm going to cap it again so we don't get any extra oxygen in there. Alright, now that my cap is on my little plastic container, I want to add starch, which is an indicator, and it's going to change colors when our titration is over. So I'm going to find my starch, and you really only need 1 drop of starch. Again, if you accidentally put in more than 1, it's not going to affect your experiment that much, but we do want to save this stuff for the other classes. So I put in 1 drop, and I'm just going to rotate the container a little bit so it mixes up, and you can see it turned black almost immediately. So I'm going to cap everything. And now I'm ready to start using the syringe. So make sure your tip is really tight on your syringe, and I'm going to be getting some of the titration solution into my syringe. So you want to start with the plunger all the way down at the bottom until it's at the 1 mark. Then I'm going to open my solution, and I'm going to draw up enough liquid until the plunger reaches not the top, but the place where the 0 is. So when the bottom of the plunger is at the 0, then you've got 1 full milliliter of liquid in the tip here. If that's really hard for you to see, there is a picture on the diagram section of your directions, or you can always ask me if you're not quite sure what to do. So then we're going to stick the tip until it sticks right in the hole at the top. And I'm just going to add drop by drop into this solution and mix it up every time until it changes color. And you'll see right away when it changes color, it's going to go till clear. So I'm going to add a drop, mix it up. It hasn't changed color yet, so I'm going to add another drop. That's just a little bit more pale than what we want. And if you have trouble seeing it, something you can do is put your liquid behind a white piece of paper, and then it's easier to see if it's actually clear or not. So you can see that ours is still a little blue. So I'm going to keep adding probably just 1 or 2 more drops. So there's 1, and if you can see now it's completely clear. So this is when I'm going to stop. And I'm going to take a reading on the syringe. So the syringe, the bottom of it, is at about 4.6. So I see it's between the 4 and the 5, and I read the little hash marks to see exactly where it is. The numbers on the syringe are kind of confusing. Instead of making a decimal point, they put a comma, but actually it should be a decimal point. So instead of what I said, it should actually be 0.46. So in my data table, I'm then going to write down So that concludes our discussion of the Winkler method today. I hope you had a great time.